The Steelers are heading into their 91st home opener with a storm to weather and a point to prove. Sunday night at Acrisure Stadium, they'll face the Seahawks with one mission that should override all others: stop the bleeding in the run defense. Sure, getting the win is priority number one. No one's denying that. And yes, improving the play on the offensive line, particularly for Broderick Jones, is part of the conversation. But if this team wants to be taken seriously, if this defense wants to live up to the hype it's so loudly embraced during training camp, then shutting down the run can no longer be optional. It has to be a mandate. I asked TJ what after the loss in East Rutherford if the run defense is fixable. His response was simple: everything's fixable. And yet, technically it is. But what matters here is whether the Steelers actually will fix it, whether they have the pieces, the mindset, and the urgency to get it done, starting immediately. Because what we saw last weekend wasn't just a bad game. It was an exposure, a weakness, one that every opponent from here on out is going to try to exploit unless Pittsburgh shows, right now, that they're capable of closing that door. Cam Hayward didn't hold back when asked about it. In his words, guys got to get off blocks. And that's not just a cliche. That's the root of it. If defensive linemen are getting locked up and neutralized at the point of attack, gaps are going to open. And when gaps open, running backs will find them over and over again. Hayward was clear. It's not just about the front line. It's a team-wide issue. From the trenches to the back end of the defense, everyone has a role in stopping the run. But let's not get it twisted. The guys up front set the tone. And when they're getting driven back or stuck in blocks, the rest of the unit is left scrambling. This has been a recurring theme for the Steelers for several seasons now. They haven't consistently been a dominant run-stopping defense since the middle of the last decade. That identity, once so synonymous with Pittsburgh football, has faded. And while the offense certainly has its issues, it's the defense, this supposed elite group, this prideful unit that believes it can carry the team, that's been coming up short in the most fundamental area. So what's the fix? According to defensive coordinator Terrell Austin, one adjustment that fans can expect to see this week is increased reps for rookie nose tackle Keanu Benton. But more notably, we're also going to see a heavier rotation involving Isaiah Loudermilk and especially newcomer Braden Fehoko, who's built like a wall and specializes in plugging those interior gaps. Yet, the most intriguing name being thrown into the mix now is rookie NT.A. Black. And let me tell you, this kid brings something different. Size, strength, raw power. He's not going to get pushed around. He might not have the technique down yet to dominate consistently. But if you're just looking for someone who can anchor and hold his ground, Black is your guy. The Steelers need that right now. They need individuals who can win one-on-one battles at the line of scrimmage, who can stack and shed, who can prevent the offensive line from dictating terms. Because when you lose at the point of attack, you're not just giving up yards, you're giving up control. And that's exactly what happened last Sunday. But stopping the run isn't just about strength. It's also about mindset. And that's where things got a little concerning. Several players voiced frustration after the game, not just with the result, but with the game plan. There was a noticeable lack of aggression, a passive approach, one that stood in stark contrast to the identity the Steelers spent all offseason hyping. They talked about being fast, physical, attacking. They talked about flying to the ball. Instead, we saw hesitation. We saw backs getting to the second level untouched. We saw a defense reacting instead of initiating. That's why this game against Seattle isn't just about cleaning up a few missed tackles or making minor schematic tweaks. It's about reestablishing who this defense really is. Are they the unit that dominated in Latrobe, that swarmed and suffocated during joint practices, that looked like a top-5 defense on paper? Or are they the team that got manhandled by a Jets offense that wasn't exactly setting the world on fire? And speaking of Seattle, they're not exactly rolling into Pittsburgh with a dominant ground attack. In their opener against the Niners, the Seahawks managed just 234 yards of total offense. Sam Darnold, making his debut under center for Seattle, threw for a modest 150 yards. Their run game? Barely a threat. Zach Charbonnet had just 47 yards on 12 carries, and Kenneth Walker added only 20 yards on 10 attempts. As a team, Seattle averaged a mere 3.2 yards per carry. That's not scary. That's not even competent. So yes, the Steelers could look better against the run this week simply because the opponent isn't as strong. But that can't be the takeaway. That can't be the crutch. They need to look better because they are better, because they made adjustments, because they played with fire, because they dictated instead of waiting to see what would happen. This is the kind of matchup where you can make a statement. This is where you show that last week was the anomaly, not the new reality. Because if Seattle comes into your house and runs the ball effectively, if they control the tempo and grind out yards between the tackles, then the Steelers will have a real identity crisis on their hands. And it won't be the kind that gets fixed with a pep talk. It's not all about the front, either. Run defense is a full unit commitment. The linebackers have to hit their gaps with confidence. The safeties have to fly downhill and support. Everyone has to tackle. There were far too many plays last week where one guy made contact, and that was it. No gang tackling, no rallying to the ball. That's effort. That's urgency. That's what needs to show up against the Seahawks. And let's talk about run blitzing, because it was noticeably absent against the Jets. That's one of the things that frustrated the defensive players the most. They weren't attacking. They weren't bringing pressure on early downs. The game plan felt conservative. It felt safe. And safe doesn't work when the other team is punching you in the mouth. That's why the 49ers looked so dominant against Seattle. They blitzed. They were aggressive. They sent bodies. They didn't sit back and wait. If you watched that game, you saw a defense that refused to give ground. You saw 4 separate 3-and-outs from the Seahawks. That wasn't a coincidence. That was intent. That was strategy. That's what the Steelers have to emulate. Not copy, but embrace in principle. Because Pittsburgh isn't going to reclaim its defensive swagger by sitting in zone coverage and hoping someone misses a block. They're going to get it back by dictating tempo, forcing mistakes, and making opponents feel them on every snap. What's wild is that this team knows it has the talent. Cam Hayward, T.J. Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Alex Highsmith. That's a group that should dominate, that should lead by example. And yet, here we are, still talking about the basics, still talking about stopping the run. So maybe it's time they do something radical. Maybe they set a silent goal, no more than 75 yards allowed on the ground. Or maybe they aim to force 3-and-outs on the first 2 drives. It doesn't have to be public. It doesn't have to be flashy. But it needs to be intentional. Because the longer they let this issue fester, the harder it's going to be to shake off the stigma. And once you get labeled as a team that can't stop the run, it sticks. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Teams stop respecting you. Players start doubting themselves. The tone shifts. And all that energy, all that momentum from training camp, gone. That's why this Sunday is more than just a game. It's a chance to reset, to send a message to themselves, to their fans, to the rest of the league. That Pittsburgh football still means something. That this defense still has teeth. And that if you're going to come into Acrisure Stadium, you better bring more than a few stretch runs and inside zones. Because this time, the Steelers might actually be ready. Of course, the other side of this matchup isn't just about the Steelers' defense. It's about how the offense supports it, or fails to. Because one of the biggest unspoken issues when a team struggles to stop the run is how often they're being forced back onto the field with short rest. 3-and-outs, stall drives, failure to control the clock. All of that puts immense pressure on the defense. And right now, this Steelers offense is not doing enough to carry its weight. The offensive line remains a major concern. Broderick Jones, who was supposed to take a big leap in his development, looked overwhelmed last week. Too many times, pressure came off the edge with ease. Too many times, the line was pushed back in pass protection and failed to open lanes in the run game. If the Steelers want to turn the corner offensively, it has to start up front. That means communication, cohesion, and above all, physicality. If they can't establish the line of scrimmage, they'll never establish rhythm. And without rhythm, you get exactly what we saw last week, a disjointed offense that can't sustain drives and leaves its defense out to dry. Kenny Pickett, for his part, wasn't terrible, but he wasn't sharp either. He missed some key throws, and more importantly, he didn't look comfortable. The timing was off. The reads were delayed. When a young quarterback is constantly under pressure and second-guessing what he sees, that's when mistakes happen. And the Steelers can't afford that. Not with the kind of defense they're trying to build around. They need Pickett to be decisive. They need him to trust what he sees. And they need the play calling to help him get into a rhythm, not constantly set him up for third-and-long situations where everything becomes predictable. One of the few bright spots in the passing game last week was Pat Freiermuth. He only had 3 catches, but every single one of them came on third down and moved the chains. That's huge. That's the kind of reliability that this offense desperately needs. And it goes beyond just the numbers. On that final scoring drive, Freiermuth threw himself into a block to help spring Jonas Smith toward the pylon. It was a selfless, physical play that didn't show up in the box score, but spoke volumes about what kind of player he is. The Steelers need more of that, not just from him, but from everyone. Deontay Johnson's absence certainly didn't help. His ability to create separation and win routes one-on-one is sorely missed when he's off the field. It puts more pressure on George Pickens, who's already drawing top coverage, and it limits what the offense can do in terms of spacing. But Calvin Austin did his part, and Jonnu Smith, though still finding his footing in the offense, flashed enough to suggest that he could become a real factor. The problem isn't the weapons. The problem is getting them the ball in the right spots at the right time and in a position to succeed. That starts with the line, continues with Pickett, and ultimately falls on the coaching staff to create a plan that puts their best players in positions to make plays. Now, as for the Seahawks, they're coming in with their own set of issues. Their performance in Week 1 wasn't just disappointing. It was flat-out uninspiring. Sam Darnold looked hesitant, and the offense never found a groove. Seattle fans are still wondering where the big plays went, and outside of Jackson Smith-Njigba, no one really stepped up. He's clearly their most dangerous weapon right now. He runs crisp routes, has elite footwork, and if the Steelers don't account for him, he can hurt them. But aside from him, the Seahawks look like a team still trying to figure themselves out. Their running back tandem, as mentioned before, was ineffective. Charbonnet and Walker are both talented, but neither looked explosive. Neither imposed their will. And when you're facing a defense that just got punched in the mouth and is looking to make a statement, you need more than just solid. You need dangerous. The Seahawks didn't look dangerous. They looked average, which is exactly why the Steelers have no excuse not to dominate the line of scrimmage and control this game defensively. There's also a mental hurdle here. For all the talent and all the coaching, this team has allowed the narrative to take shape that they can't stop the run. And the longer it continues, the more real it becomes. Not just to the fans or the media, but to the players themselves. That's the danger. That's what has to be avoided at all costs. Because once doubt creeps in, it spreads. And it doesn't matter how many slogans you repeat or how many film sessions you run. Confidence is either there or it isn't. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. Whispers have been swirling around Pittsburgh, and the rumor mill is heating up. The Steelers are reportedly making a major move to fortify their offensive line, and all eyes are on TEVIN Jenkins. Sources close to the team suggest that Jenkins, known for his ironclad blocking and relentless consistency, could become the cornerstone of a line that has long struggled to provide rock-solid protection for the quarterback. While nothing has been officially confirmed, insiders hint that Pittsburgh sees in Jenkins the kind of player who can transform their offensive front from a liability into a fortress. The buzz is that Jenkins isn't just another addition. He's a statement. Analysts familiar with his game tape describe him as a mammoth presence with an almost uncanny ability to anticipate defensive schemes. Imagine a QB who suddenly has all the time in the world to survey the field. Rumor has it that's exactly what Steelers brass is envisioning. Conversations around league circles suggest that if this move goes through, the team might be quietly signaling a shift in strategy. More emphasis on a clean pocket, more explosive play-action passes, and a line that opponents will dread facing. Fans have already begun speculating wildly about what this could mean for the Steelers' offense next season. Social media feeds are buzzing with posts imagining Jenkins anchoring the left tackle spot, shutting down edge rushers like a brick wall and giving the team's quarterback newfound confidence. Some insiders even hint that the front office sees Jenkins as a potential leader in the locker room, someone whose presence can elevate not just performance, but morale. While all of this remains unofficial, the rumor is enough to set tongues wagging across Pittsburgh and beyond. Could TEVIN Jenkins be the piece that finally turns the Steelers' offensive line into an impenetrable unit? If these whispers are accurate, opponents may soon find themselves staring down a wall they cannot breach, and the burble of excitement in Steelers Nation will only grow louder. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.